You're listening to the Mindful Mama Podcast, episode 89. Today, we're talking about teaching our kids resilience and well-being. Welcome to the Mindful Mama Podcast. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you are thriving and when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindfulness Mama Mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in their daily lives and take family and life to a new level of awakening. I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I'm the mom of two girls, ages 7 and 10, who keep me on my toes. Thank you so much for being here today, dear listener. I am so grateful that you're here. I'm grateful for your ears and your presence. I really appreciate it, whether you are listening in the car or you are out on a walk. I really appreciate you taking me along with you. Maybe you are folding laundry. I like to listen to podcasts while folding laundry. Do you? I mean, I don't know. For me, that's a good podcast time. Anyway, I'm so glad you're here today because I'm really excited to share this interview with you with Renee Jain. And Renee is tech entrepreneur turned speaker and life coach, and she specializes in cultivating skills of resilience in both adults and children. And she takes research-based concepts and transforms them into engaging and digestible learning modules. And so for kids, what we're going to talk about today is for kids, she has created this amazing programs found at GoZen to teach life skills via digital animation. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this conversation. We talked about how to stress better, how to teach kids about processing emotions, why being present is really hard, and what our culture is teaching us, and why we feel like we need to distract our kids all the time, why we haven't learned how to use tech mindfully, and even sensitive learning periods. We're going to talk more also about the science of well-being, and this is a very hopeful interview, so I can't wait for you to get your takeaways about this, and you'll even hear about the Star Wars analogy, which I think is a great one. Before we dive in, I want to thank Mrs. Chrissy C. for the 5-star iTunes review, and she says, "Thank you for reminding me of the important things." You are welcome, Chrissy. I'm so thankful to you for leaving a review. It's a great way to support the podcast. It's super easy to leave a review now. You can just do it on your phone. Search for the Mindful Mama podcast and then click over to ratings and reviews. And there's a place to leave a rating and review right there. So it only takes a few minutes. And if you haven't left a rating and review yet, now is the perfect time, I guess, if you're not driving, to leave one. So please do that. Coming up in real time here at the World of the Mindfulness Mama Mentor, I am going to be enrolling soon some group coaching programs. The Mindful Mama Transformation Group coaching programs are going to be starting in November. And this is a really powerful program. It's a very small group. We go with a maximum of 7 participants, and we gather together frequently over the course of 6 months to hold each other's hands and walk ourselves through learning to bring mindfulness into your daily lives, learning to transform our anxieties, learning to take brave steps in the world, learning to be really present with our kids. So you can learn more about that over at hunterclarkfields.com. Click over to work with me, and you can learn more about that. I think you can get on the waiting list, and there's an application process, but don't be afraid. You just apply and talk to me about it, and we can talk more about the Mindful Mama Transformation Group coaching. It's coming up really soon. So that's it. On to this episode with Renee Jain. Renee, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast. I'm so glad you could be here today.
I am happy to be here. Can't wait.
It's so funny because I just totally mispronounced your name
It
but
happens every day. Let's blame my parents.
we're
They're
gonna work.
quirky.
They give you a I have a funky name too, so it makes it memorable, right? Like people remember
Exactly.
Renee, people remember Hunter, and then you're in trouble because everybody remembers your name, and you're like, wait, what was
You're
your
like,
name again?
yeah.
That's frustrating. Yeah, I totally get that. So I'm excited to share your work with my audience today. I'm really excited about what you're doing. So I would like it if you could just give us a little rundown on what is GoZen.
GoZen is a place where we create content that teaches kids skills I basically wish I had learned when I was a kid. Skills of resilience, skills of well-being, life skills. I actually didn't realize all of these things were things that you could learn. Like you can learn to play the violin, you can actually practice well-being, you can practice how to be good at life, you can practice how to overcome challenges. So we teach kids concepts in bite-sized modules and animations. So basically we create cartoons that engage them and we teach them skills through the cartoons.
That is so cool. So what and it's on everyone will be able to check it out at gozen.com and tell us a little bit more about who is using GoZen and what do they come there for mostly?
So, we have a really interesting mix at this point of people that are using GoZen. We have the programs that we've created. So, we have a variety of programs are right now in about 1,500 schools. Usually K through 8 is where it is being used. And really our sweet spot is like late elementary and middle school. We have parents that are using it at home with their kids. And then we have therapists that are using it in their office to support the work that they're doing with kids. So it's kind of a variety of schools, parents, and therapists. And really, at the end of the day, the end user is the child.
That's so cool. And so GoZen helps kids with well-being, with resilience, and it really grabs them through cartoons. The kids like it. They're into it.
A lot of people come to us because they're believe that their kids are either anxious or they're highly stressed. But yeah, there is a just beyond teaching how kids can, we don't say stress management and we don't say that they should be stress free. I think that's setting the bar too high. And it's also putting it at a place that's not really aligned with the science of well being. So we teach kids how to stress better.
Mm.
And so a lot of parents come to us saying that their kids are chronically stressed out. But beyond just kind of getting rid of the bad stuff, right, and taking yourself from a -10 to a 0, right, which is what we believe would happen if you got rid of all the bad stuff in your life, right? If you got yourself to a place where you were stressed in a way that works for you, then you'd probably be close to a neutral. But we want kids to thrive, right? Not just survive. So we teach them how to identify their character strengths. We teach them the science of purpose, the science of joy, the science of meaning. We teach them about how they can cultivate those things as well so they can go beyond just the neutral point into thriving.
Wow. Wow, that is so cool. So I'm sure everybody is completely enthralled and excited about this by what you've said. Character strengths, finding purpose, finding joy, finding meaning, helping our kids become less stressed. So it's clearly fascinating. It's clearly needed. But let's go back a little bit now, Renee, to you said this is teaching the things that you wished you had learned as a kid. And I often think that we teach kids like we don't teach kids so many important life skills. Like we don't teach kids how to take care of big feelings. We don't teach kids how to communicate with one another. We don't teach kids how to do a tax form, you know? So tell us about your own story and how it was for you growing up and what you missed that are some of these skills that you now are teaching.
Yeah, I was a chronically worried child. I had all of these worries racing through my head. I would lie down at night and the worries would take off like an airplane and I couldn't sleep and I would wake up in the morning exhausted and I would go to school and I would worry some more. And my worries kind of varied, It was social worries. So, what if I don't get asked to this party? And academic worries. What if I don't do well on this test? And then it just a bunch of more unidentifiable things. Like, I know I'm kind of worried. I'm not exactly sure what about. And my parents are loving and compassionate and amazing and supportive. And, they did the best they could. And they offered a lot of reassurance. You're going to be okay. Trust me. You'll be fine. We'll get you through this. There's nothing to worry about, because that's what they thought they could do to help. Right. And unfortunately, the reassurance didn't really quell my worry. And it got to the point where I felt like I was not only suffering myself, but I was making them suffer alongside me. And that was hard to watch. And I kept thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just stop? Why can't I just tell my brain to stop? And so I did something I think a lot of kids do. I did something I think a lot of adults do, which is scary. I just feigned indifference and sort of faked it. I pretended like everything was okay. And I pretended like I was fine. Like one day I just got over it. And my mom was like, how come you're not coming to me with your worries anymore? And I just said, oh, I'm fine now. So school's okay. Yep. Good. Fine. Friends are okay. Yep. Fine. Fine. Everything was fine. I transformed myself into just an emotional stoic. I just had no feelings. And the funny thing is that the research around this shows you that you cannot numb the dark stuff within you without numbing the light. There's just no way to mute one side of your humanity. And so I hoarded pain for a really long time, probably, I would say, from the age of maybe 11 or so until I was in my mid-20s, when I was in a really terrible relationship and I went through a breakup and I started having these horrifying panic attacks that I thought were heart attacks. I kept going to the ER, telling the doctor, I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack. And he kept saying, you're back again. You're not having a heart attack. He's like, you're having panic attacks. I'm like, no, hook me up. Check my heart. So, I had a massive panic attack one day. I went to the hospital. He's like, you're having a panic attack. You need to change your life. And the words just sunk in. And it was the first time, frankly, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of resources. I couldn't go to therapy. I don't know if my parents would have put me in therapy anyway, but we couldn't afford it. So I, like many high functioning people with high functioning anxiety, was able to do well in some parts of my life. So I was already doing pretty well in business. I could finally afford to go to a therapist. So I went to one and I was lying down on his sofa, and he really did sort of look like Freud. It was kind of funny. And as he's teaching me to allow my feelings to rise up for the first time in many, many years, I just had this moment of clarity, like sort of this aha moment. I jolted up and I just said to him, I can't believe this. And he said, what are you like? What are you talking about? Are you okay? I'm like, do you have a time machine? Because I literally think 8-year-old Renee could have learned what you're teaching me now. I don't understand why we don't teach every single kid what you're teaching me. So I was in a technology field at the time, and I basically sold my business, became a life coach. Then I went back to school, got a master's in psychology, and I was like, I am doing this. I am teaching these skills to kids. And so, what I do at GoZen is, I teach life skills to kids using cartoons. But what I do is I really teach kids things that I wish I knew when I was a kid.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, that's amazing. So, you had this typical childhood, you're doing well, you're obviously you're in a tech startup, you're doing pretty well, but this highly functioning anxiety and this worry, and I love that wake up call, like, why don't we teach this to every single kid, but you're teaching me. And so what you're saying is basically teaching kids about our how to take care of our difficult feelings. Yeah.
I am teaching them what they would learn if they ended up in therapy way before they ever need it, right? Yeah, how to deal with your challenges, how to deal with those big feelings, how to process your emotions. Because with the way we're going right now, you can enroll as many psychologists and psychiatrists and other coaches and other mental health practitioners into schooling. We will never catch up with what's going on with the epidemic of anxiety and depression. The only way to catch up with it is prevention at this point. The only way to change the trajectory really of this next generation is to teach them these skills way in advance, because every child will face a challenge and we don't want to take that from them. That's part of their path, right? We don't want to prevent the challenge. We just want to teach them the skills that they need to overcome, and then also, to go from surviving to thriving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love this, because this is exactly what this is exactly what my work is with teaching moms, is like when we are teaching, we modeling, right? We need to learn ourselves how to process big emotions, how to deal with challenges, how to communicate skillfully, how to be able to be present with the things that are difficult, how to regulate our stress response, and as we learn that ourselves as parents, then we model that, right, for our kids. And unfortunately, for most of us, for the vast majority of generations of us, we weren't really shown healthy ways to process emotions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our parents' generation and the generations before, and I'm saying this with no judgment, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just like, if a kid displayed big emotions, the goal was to make the emotions go away,
Yes.
as fast as possible, or hide them. So, send the kid to their room, time them out until they're able to come back with the emotions that we are accepting, which is all on, one side of the spectrum of emotion. So if you're going to show me happiness, you're going to show me joy, you're going to show me cheer, I'm okay with that. If you're going to show me anger, you're going to show me negativity, you're going to show me sadness, I'm going to try to fix that. And again, I'm saying this with no judgment. People
Mm-hmm.
are doing this with all the love and the compassion in the world. But what the message that we have sent to our kids is, listen, those emotions are wrong. They
Mm-hmm.
don't they don't have a place in society. And so go to your room, make them go away and come back out. And we wonder why, when our kids are teens, they go to their room and they close the door and they numb themselves often in various ways, because they cannot process the emotions that we've been telling them since they were really little that they shouldn't have anyway.
I know, it's crazy, right? It's crazy, and then, I can so relate to everything you're saying. I mean, like when I was little, I was basically got the example or the message that my big feelings were unacceptable, because as my dad would, I love him and he was doing the best he could, and I totally get it, because it's just these generations of suffering, but he would get angry when I had big feelings, and so it was a big message that this wasn't acceptable. And so then, of course, when my daughter was 2 years old and she had these big emotions, and even though I had been meditating and I was teaching yoga, and I was like going to be this great parent, it was like, oh, boom, there's that button of like, this is an unacceptable feeling, right? And it's just, we pass these things on. So it's like, that whole idea of like, how do we take care of these difficult feelings? I mean, for me, I don't know, I just see it as also as the root of almost like every societal problem that we have is comes down to that. I mean, it's insane.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. And Hunter, I think exactly what you're saying is unbeknownst to us, we have that wiring from when we were really little. So we think when we have kids, it's going to be different. And then all of a sudden we hear our parents' voices coming out of us. And so I think the first step with that is really an awareness, right? Like, whoa, okay, I have somehow just I've somehow taken on the voice of the generations past, and I do not want to repeat that cycle. And so I'm just going to be aware of that, and I'm going to know that I have a choice, and it requires slowing down, significantly slowing down, so that we can give our kids something that we didn't necessarily have, which is the space to process those big emotions. Now, there's definitely challenges in that, right? I mean, there's sensory challenges for a lot of people, because a lot of times when kids are younger, especially, it's not just the big emotions, but there's noise that goes along with it. There's screaming, sometimes there's hitting, sometimes there's biting, right? And so we have an internal reaction to that as well. So this is hard work. It's not just, okay, let the child sit, in quiet and process their sadness. A lot of times that comes out as anger, aggression. And so it's up to us as parents to have sort of emotional x-ray vision to be able to see what's underneath that.
Mm-hmm.
That takes work.
Yeah. Or even to guess, I suppose, like, oh, wow, looks like you're feeling really frustrated. And they will tell you if you're wrong. No,
Not
that is
frustrated.
not it.
I know.
That is not it. Oh, this is so cool. I love this, Renee. This work that you're doing is so needed, and to bring it to children, and I feel like it's really needed in sort of every level of society, right? Like, how do we take care of our challenging feelings? Because I feel like the ways of the past, maybe we had healthier ways when we all worked on a farm and we could just get our yayas out, but but I feel like the sort of the numbing that we do, as far as, like, reaching for food, or reaching for shopping, or just TV or the internet and things like that. There's so much numbing that's happening now. And we're seeing it more and more in this generation of kids. So can you tell us a little bit more about and I'm not sure if you're completely sort of up to date on this or whatever, but I'm just guessing that you are, about what about that sort of epidemic of anxiety, and what is going on in sort of the up and coming generation of kids.
Yeah, there are a lot of variables. I think you definitely touched on one, which is just this pervasive busyness, right? That is really an avoidance of just being, of us just being. It's hard for us to just be anymore, whether that means like literally sitting and staring at the wall, and that is really like being, or just being at home in very ordinary conditions, with our children, being with our feelings, being with our senses, being present. That is become very hard. There is so we feel like we need to fill that for various reasons. One, because we don't process our emotions, right? So if we have to deal with something, then instead of dealing with the emotion that's going through us, we busy ourselves. So we don't, it's one way of not having to deal with it. And if we are not able to process our own emotions, most likely we don't want our kids to process theirs. And so if you are dealing with really little kids, a lot of times we scoot them around from here to there to kind of fill up the day, because little kids have a lot of emotions that we have to deal with throughout the day, right? And it could be from anything as little as like the drink that you give them to whatever, right? To the outfit that they're having to wear. And it's like, oh my goodness, I can't deal with this. So you know what? Maybe I'll take them to a play space, and maybe I'll take them here, and maybe we'll zip around there, and then the day will be over, even though you love your kids and you would give your life for your kids, right? So I think that just being has become very difficult, and there are a lot of outs to just being now. There's technology, which is a quick out. whether that be an iPad or whether that be television. Then for kids that are getting a little bit older, there is social media, and there's the quantification of things that we didn't have to deal with growing up. I maybe knew I wasn't invited to a party, but it wasn't made obvious by Instagram pictures. I maybe knew that someone didn't like me so much, but it wasn't put in my face by number of likes or lack thereof or comments made on some social media thing. And so I think that social comparison has become so starkly quantified that it's like, yeah, look, only 6 people liked this post instead of 700 people, or I only have this number of friends online. And then there's also just the disconnection from the online connection, which, by the way, as I mentioned, I worked in technology. I love technology. And so I'm not anti-tech. I'm not saying let's go live in a forest, although that would be nice sometimes. But what I'm saying is that we haven't learned to use it mindfully, any of us. And so this is contributing to the levels of anxiety. Then, there's the race to nowhere, right? So kindergarten is like second grade now. First grade is like third grade. We are not paying attention to developmental milestones anymore, where, like, for example, your brain will learn colors at a particular age, right? Your brain is evolved to learn colors at a particular age, but parents, and if you wait till that particular age, the mind is ripe to receive that information. But parents might say, oh, I want my child to learn, when they're 6 months old, which is not the right age. And so they start teaching them. So we're starting to teach things at times because, look, all with love. I'm saying this without judgment. We're doing it with love because we're saying at the end of the day, when you ask a parent what they want for their kids, they're going to tell you they want them to be happy or successful or happy and successful or have good health, right? There's not that many. The variation of answers is really minimal. It's like, what do you want for your kids when they grow up? Happiness, health, and then some people say success, which is like a combination of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get that at any cost, we're doing things that are just not aligned with the science of well-being. So I think that all of these things contribute to the level of anxiety. I don't think it's because we're better at diagnostics and we're better at figuring out whether kids are anxious. So I don't think that certainly that plays a part, but it doesn't account for why depression and anxiety are the number one burden of disease in the world.
I know it seems crazy because, on the surface, if you think about where we are compared to where we have been in the past, like everybody has enough clothes to wear practically. Like if you're talking about Western society anyway, like most people are fed. Everybody has these like advanced things like TVs and all of our beds are way softer than any king or queen's bed would have been like in the 12th century, right? but but it's so, on the surface, everything is so much better, yet we seem to have so much suffering. And you're just pointing out these ways that we suffer, the quantifying of social comparison. I mean, that's something I haven't thought about that much. My oldest daughter is 10 and a half. And so I haven't seen a lot of that yet, but this idea of we haven't learned to use tech mindfully and having, I think, we could talk a little bit more about maybe some of the boundaries around that and what is like healthy use of that. But then also like you really bring stuff up for me about not paying attention and learning our developmental milestones. I'm a big believer. I love I really like Montessori education, where they emphasize that every kid has sensitive learning periods where,
Mm-hmm.
there's a child that, may have a sensitive learning period for algebra or reading or something like that. And the teachers, they work with the child's sensitive learning periods. And when they are in a sensitive learning period for a certain thing, they go with it and they fly and they do long division down, taped up to the ceiling and going down to the floor, and they have a lot of fun with it. And then they may not focus as much on other periods. So that it's like kind of more about following the child and honoring those sensitive learning periods. But what you're saying is that most of society is kind of going in the opposite direction, right? Where we are just racing to more and more and more. So what are, there's all these pressures in our world. There's these pressures to constantly be distracted, to constantly buy more stuff, to constantly be listening, doing whatever. So what are some of the ways that we can engage with some of these things in a healthy way? What are some of the things that you've seen are healthier ways to engage with tech, or are healthier ways to honor our kids' developmental milestones, or et cetera?
I think it's super important that we have system designs in place in our homes when the kids are little, especially, that we have more control over how we set up our home, the infrastructure, the culture of the home, right? The values in the home, and like the way that we use technology in the home, so that we can form some habits from that for them from a young age. So whether that be when we watch TV, when we engage with our devices, and when we put them away, having dinner together and releasing those things, and then literally doing times where you have digital detox times where it's like, okay, for the entire weekend, we know we're all together. We're only going to check our phone once in a while for emergencies, to make sure that everything's okay. But we are going to do our best to intentionally not engage with this stuff. It takes a lot of intentionality to set things up like this, because devices are made to be addictive, right? There is an addictive quality to them. Most of us are addicted in one way or another. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but it can be some simple rules like, I'm not going to sleep with my phone, right? I'm going to put it outside of the room. And there is going to be a pain point for those of us who have been sleeping with our phone next to us, because, again, there are addictive qualities to getting up in the morning and hitting refresh and us getting a little dopamine kick and it being like, ooh, that feels good. And so we have to set these things up. We have to do it with intention. We have to know that it's like going to the gym. It's not the easiest thing to do, because that's all the modeling that we're doing for our kids. And we're also kind of protecting them, because in the future, whether that be your child goes to a school where in kindergarten they're handed an iPad, or that be sometime in the future, right? So if your child goes to like a non-technology school, well, sometime in the future, they're going to have access to tech. So I think that it's super important that you start, and look, if your kids aren't what quote unquote young, whatever that is, then just start where you are and do what you can, because I think it's so, so, so incredibly important, right? And just monitor yourself. Have I had conversations in the day where I haven't looked at my phone? Have I been present with my children, even if they're doing something that I'm not doing? Because it always feels like, well, they're doing something anyway. So they're watching, they're playing something anyway. So I might as well just check this anyway. You'll be surprised if you just sit down on the ground while they're playing or while whatever they're doing their homework, how many times they actually glance at you, right? You'll be surprised at like the nonverbal communication that goes on, or that they know that you're present and you're not elsewhere mentally. So I think that these things only get set up systematically, right? I think that they get set up with intentional design. I think if you're just like, I'm going to do my best, that it's just not going to happen, even though your intention is to do your best, unless you have some systems in place and you're actually very explicitly explaining to your kids why you're doing it. So with my kids, I am far from perfect, trust me. But with my kids that are 3 and 4 years old, I will I'll say to them, mommy's looking at her phone right now because I have to do this, and I'll tell them why and for what period of time. And then I'll put it down and I'll say, oh, we don't do phones at the table. And like my kids will even say, we don't do phones at the table, and they'll take the phones and they'll put them away. We don't do them when we're sleeping. So, like things like that. Obviously, I'm not saying anything that's not intuitive, but what I am saying is that if you don't make a plan and you don't make a commitment, these things don't happen.
Yeah, yeah, that intentionality has to be there. In our home, we have screen-free Sunday, so every Sunday we just take a break. It's just a way to take a break. But I love that question you're asking, like, have I been present even while they're doing other things? Um, I pick my girls up from the bus stop, and then they're like kind of playing, and I'm kind of like, okay, that would probably be a good time uh, to be a little more present. But it's so amazing to just even see our culture, even as adults. Like, I go to the bus stop, and like my neighbors and are there that I know, and the other parents, um, and everybody's like looking at their phone.
Everybody's looking at their phone. Everyone's looking at their phone. And for kids who are younger, they don't have a phone, right? So they're like, wow, this thing that you guys have is super important. I don't really know what's going on it, but I know it's important because everyone has them. And you will see how they sell play phones
Oh,
and like the kids play with the phones because they're just modeling the behavior that they see all around them. But there's a lack of engagement and presence, on a global level, really, because there are phones everywhere. So they're not going anywhere. And I'm not saying like we should just throw them out the door because there's a lot of benefit to technology and to connecting with other people. Look, Hunter and I have never met and we're connecting online like this, right? So there's a lot of beauty in the connections that you can find online. But I think that if we are not systematic about being mindful, that it just is you're swimming against the current with this.
yeah.
And let's not demonize our kids because these things are addictive. The devices are addictive, right? And so it's not about shouting at them and making them, taking their devices away. It's about engaging them in the conversation too, and finding creative ways to get their buy-in to do things like screen-free Sunday.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Part of the was a conversation with our kids about, about how technology is addictive, and how your brains are developing, and how we all need time. Even mommy and daddy need time to kind of take a break. So it really was a very, uh, transparent kind of conversation. So the science. Tell us a little bit more then about, we've talked about this idea of our kids' big feelings and processing emotions. We've talked about the technology and the culture that we're in that is so challenging to do these things, to being present, to sitting with discomfort, because everything tells us not to do that and to go distract ourselves with something else. So what does the science tell us about greater well-being, specifically for kids, but then I'm sure some of it probably also applies to adults too.
So, what does the science tell us about greater well being is that it's something that can be changed, right? It's something that can be practiced, that you can adjust the set point or your natural disposition. So, if you have a child that you would consider to be a natural pessimist, right, or a more natural, they're leaning toward that's something that's okay, right? There might be a natural set point that they've come in with or a natural disposition, but with practice, these things can change. So I think that the field of neuroscience growing and showing us that there's plasticity in our brain and that our brains can grow and our brains can change and that we can rewire is incredibly important because for the most part, I know that growing up, I felt like I was just whatever the cards I was dealt was what I had, and I'm just this way and that's just kind of the way it is. So I think that the science is super exciting when kids know that their brains can grow and their brains can change and that they can adjust their well-being. It's huge. I
Mm.
think it's also important to teach kids really explicitly that things come and go and that emotions are transient and that they are not permanent, right? They're not forever. But there actually is a message within every emotion, and every emotion actually has a purpose. So let us change what we've been teaching our kids and teach them about the science of every single emotion. There's a reason that we feel guilty, right? It can prevent us from doing something to hurt someone else in the future. There is a purpose for anger. It can be a very positive catalyst for change. It's led to social revolutions, right? Um, Rosa Parks was extremely angry and she used her anger for good. So anger is not always bad. There is a reason for it. It just needs to be processed. You need to sit with it. You need to listen to its message. So I think, these are some of the things that when it comes to the science of well-being, we can get really granular with the kids. So yeah, you start with, look, your brain can change. You can change your well-being with practice. And then we introduce some of the techniques. Like, here are some of the techniques, and there are so many different ones. And not every technique resonates with every kid. It's just, it varies from kid to kid. It depends on their age. And we as parents need to meet them where they're at, right? So if they are into games, then we make it a game. If they're into science fiction, then I often use Star Wars, to talk to kids. And that everyone has a light and dark side of the force within them, so you just have to make it accessible to them so it's engaging to them. All the concepts are universal.
I love that. The Star Wars analogy. I'm totally going to use that. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen that in my own learning with my daughter. She's kind of a highly sensitive kid, and I taught her. I said at a certain point, she's 10 and a half now. At a certain point, maybe a year ago or a couple of years ago, I said, you know what, Maggie? I said, honey, you're like an orchid. And, a lot of people there are like dandelions, and dandelions can grow and be beautiful and thrive in a lot of different conditions and all over the place. But an orchid needs special conditions to grow and thrive, and, really needs the right kind of food and the right kind of light and but then can be a beautiful orchid. And I talked to her about that, talking about, you need to really take care of how much sleep you get and how much food you get, and it's and how you're taking care of your body. And it's been really interesting because she's referenced back to that conversation now a couple times, and it helped her kind of understand, like, I have to take care of myself. And she actually went to a sleepover party recently, and she went downstairs on the couch and went to bed earlier than everybody else who was having a dance party.
She's like, I'm an orchid. Need my sleep.
I know. It was great. It was great. So, so cool. I love that idea of plasticity and just teaching kids that they can change that growth mindset, right? And teaching about our emotions, and it's interesting because you're basically talking about impermanence, that everything is fleeting, and kind of embracing that. I think that's hard enough for many adults to wrap our heads around, huh?
Yes, that this too shall pass, and that it's okay to lean into the discomfort. I mean, that alone is life-changing, right?
Yes.
What do you mean? I don't have to get rid of it? No, you don't have to get rid of it.
Yes.
That can take a lifetime of practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Leaning into the discomfort is so huge. Oh my gosh. Renee, I have a feeling I could kind of pick your brain about this stuff for a long time because I really geek out on this kind of thing. So, but what would you like for parents listening to this who are concerned about their kids and don't want their kids to grow up like feeling so anxious, and maybe they're going to start to make some boundaries around technology, and maybe they're going to take in some of this information and make a few changes. But what would you like to say to those parents about where they can direct their energy towards helping their child have more well-being?
I think the first step is to understand that stress is part of who we are. It's part of our humanity, and that it's actually okay, and that it can even be used to our advantage. And so it's not a matter of quashing it. It's just a matter of redirecting it. And please feel free to use the term stress better, because that's what I say and we say. I would, if you have a child that is going through something and you feel like they're exhibiting anxious behavior or they're getting stressed out chronically, then on GoZen.com, we have a free video series that can teach kids about stress and what it does in their body and how they can make some changes. And then, of course, we have programming as well. But I just want you to know as parents, number one, that you're not alone. And number two, I implore you to adopt for yourself a voice of self-compassion, not just because it's a warm fuzzy to be kind to yourself and speak to yourself as a friend would, but because it is the voice that your child adopts as well. So if you don't want them to be self-critical, then model self-compassion and know that there's no fault in this, right? There's no guilt in this. There's no fault in this. You are not there to control what your child is going through. You are there to guide them, right? So your child is a Jedi in training and you are their Yoda.
I love that. I love that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, Renee, to come on the Mindful Mama podcast. And obviously, parents, I want you to go check out GoZen.com. I will be looking at it a lot more in the coming days and sharing some stuff with my kids. And how else can people find out about your work and how to contact you?
GoZen.com is probably the best place. And then you can also visit me at reneejain.com, which has a little bit more info. But otherwise, yeah, GoZen.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Hunter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Renee. The work she's doing is so exciting, right? Don't you love that Star Wars analogy and just yes, we need to teach kids how to deal with challenges, how to process emotions. Yes. And to do that, one of the best ways is to learn how to do it ourselves, and to learn how to be more present ourselves. So if you are interested, just to let you know again, I will be enrolling soon the Mindful Mama Transformation Group Coaching program coming up soon, so you can learn about that more over at hunterclarkfields.com on the Work With Me page. And so that is coming up. And if you have questions about this episode with Renee Jain, or if you have questions about any other episode, you can email me at hunter@hunterclarkfields.com. You can go and leave a comment over at mindfulmamapodcast.com. That's where all the episodes are. And I hope you will, if you enjoyed this episode, if you got some benefit, share it with a friend today. That's such a great way to support the podcast. If you haven't subscribed and leave a rating, you have no idea. It makes such a big difference. It really is huge. So please do subscribe and leave a rating. And don't forget to grab that free audio guide, mindfulmomguide.com. I'm throwing a lot of websites at you. Oh my God, you guys, is it too much? Oh, I hope not. I'm going to add to your overwhelm. If it's overwhelming, just breathe. Take a deep breath in, let it out. Take what you can, take what works for you, and leave the rest, okay? I don't want to add to your overwhelm. I just want to help water your good seeds. So I hope this has watered your good seeds today. I'm so happy to connect with you. I'm so glad you are here. And I'm really wishing you a beautiful week, a week of being present, being able to be with your discomfort, being able to be with your joy. Because when you're able to be with your discomfort, then you're able to be with your joy even more. So that's what it's all about, right? Thanks so much, friends. Have a great week. Namaste. Are you frustrated with parenting? Do you want to practice conscious, compassionate parenting, but you don't know how? It's not easy, and there's no roadmap for this until now. I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I know how frustrating it is because I've been there. I really struggled as a young mom, and when I found myself yelling and triggered by my child a lot, I knew there had to be a better way. And there is. Mindful parenting is different from other parenting trainings. They don't tell you that all of that good advice is as good as useless when our internal stress response is triggered. Mindful parenting teaches you research-based tools and practices to reduce your stress response so you can respond rather than react. And it teaches you exactly what to say so that you can create willing cooperation from your child. You can learn more and enroll at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and you can join us for a free live training from October 9th through 13th, where you'll learn why your kids don't listen to you, what punishment really teaches, how to tame a tantrum at every age, and the hidden myth that undermines your parenting. Sign up now at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. I'll see you there.